I'm Emily, a 44-year-old TV broadcaster, and my husband Tom, also 44, runs a photography studio. We began dating in high school, got married at 26, and were each other's first love. It felt like a natural progression for us, and we never considered anyone else. When I was 25, losing my parents in an accident was devastating. Tom, who felt like family, provided unwavering support. After marriage, Tom moved into my parents' house, and I felt the security of both my parents and him. 2 years into our marriage, our joy multiplied with the arrival of our son. Tom was an ideal partner, actively participating in household chores and childcare, making him perfect for a working couple. However, my mother-in-law Jen had issues with Tom doing housework. The incident I want to discuss happened 10 years ago when our son started elementary school. Jen, living 30 minutes away by train, began frequenting our house to assist with picking up our son after school. This became necessary due to the less flexible and unappealing after-school care. Around the same time, my father-in-law, Steve, had retired, but Jane, being a traditional housewife, couldn't contribute to household chores. Whenever Tom cooked, she would express disapproval, saying a man shouldn't be in the kitchen. Even during my first visit to Tom's parents' house, Jane suggested that I should quit my job. She held onto the belief that women should be housewives, and my glamorous broadcasting job didn't sit well with her. Despite Jane's views, Tom and I supported each other's dreams. We navigated the challenges of nursery school together, expecting elementary school to be easier. However, the inflexible after-school care pushed us to rely more on Jane. As she became involved, she started criticizing things like the laundry folding and cleaning, making our home life more challenging. But Tom would casually reply, "Oh, I'm in charge of the laundry. Is that not okay?" Or, "It's fine. No one dies from a bit of dust." Yet she would still complain to Tom behind my back, saying, "Aren't you ashamed to let your husband do the laundry?" Or, "It's bad for our reputation." However, since her help was appreciated, I just listened without talking back. On the other hand, Jen had old-fashioned views, but was open to new things. Unusually for her age, she owned a smartphone. "I'm the only one among my friends who has a phone," she would boast. She used the internet to look up various things, saying, "See, you can do this kind of thing so easily now. You have to use convenient things." She made good use of it, making reservations at restaurants and using online services. At that time, our family relied on a delivery service for our weekly shopping orders via paper and having it delivered. This too seemed to displease Jane. She would say things like, "You should just go shopping yourself, and the delivery fee is a waste." But when she discovered that the service could be ordered online, she urged me, "Why do you do this, Emily? Ordering on paper is so old-fashioned." When Jane would stay until late at night so that Tom and I were preparing dinner, she would say, "I have to go back for Steve's dinner, and he won't eat if he's alone." And then she would leave. Steve really couldn't do any housework at all. "Tom, why is it that you, who grew up in such an environment, are so cooperative with household chores?" I asked Tom once. He replied, "Mom always complained anxiously about Dad not helping with the chores. I decided that when I got married, I would definitely help out to avoid being complained about." So it was a case of learning by negative example. Jane was angry that her husband didn't do housework and found it amusing that her son did. I couldn't understand what would satisfy her, but I guess she just liked to complain, so I tried to keep my distance as much as possible. At that time, I had no idea that Jane was so cornered that she would end up doing something like selling our house without permission. Yes, that summer, I was offered a chance by my company to go on a 2-month business trip overseas to participate in a sports broadcast at the World Championship. It was a rare opportunity, and I felt rewarded for all my efforts. I couldn't pass up this chance, so I immediately consulted with Tom. He was busy with various things and said, "Of course, I want to help, but I'm not sure I can manage to take care of our son, John, while working." Then Jen, who was listening, offered, "Then I'll take care of things at home for a while." This despite my concerns due to past experiences. I had no one else to rely on and decided to entrust my son to Jane. We considered having Tom and John stay at Tom's parents', but it would be difficult to commute to school from there. So Jane decided to come to our house on weekdays. After successfully completing my business trip, exhausted yet relieved to return to the U.S., I arrived home on a weekday afternoon with a heavy suitcase in hand. To my surprise, Jane greeted me at the entrance as if she had been eagerly waiting for me. As I was about to thank her for taking care of the house during my absence, she uttered something unbelievable. "This house sold for $300,000, so I'm taking the full amount." My tired mind couldn't comprehend what she said for a moment. "This house, our house?" I asked in disbelief, to which she replied with shining eyes, "Yes, this house." "Ah, no, I mean, we don't own a house." Confused and struggling to make sense of the situation, I replied, "Just that." Jane burst into laughter, exclaiming, "What are you talking about, Emily? Why would you lie like that? There's a registration certificate in your name. I won't be fooled." Feeling the conversation was going nowhere, I decided to change the topic to calm my heart down. "Well, let's set that aside for a moment. Why are you selling it?" Jane replied confidently, "What belongs to the wife belongs to the husband, and therefore to me. I'm using it to build a new house." Her eyes were bloodshot as she said this, and I started to feel scared. "A new house? Whose exactly?" "Mine and my husband's, and you guys will live there. This way, Tom won't have to do household chores anymore. I've been so sorry for him. I raised him not to do such things, and I won't allow Tom to do household chores in the future," she said with a look of truth on her face. As I pieced together the story, it turns out that shortly after we got married, when Tom was in the kitchen, she told him to let me do such things. Tom had replied, "No, this house is Emily's. I have to do at least this much." Apparently, she had misconstrued this to mean that Tom was doing chores because he was living in my house. She always believed that Tom actually didn't want to do household chores and preferred to focus on his work. The idea of a working couple cooperating in household chores just didn't exist in her mind. Furthermore, I later found out that after Steve retired, his pension was less than expected, and he struggled to find reemployment. This led to them feeling insecure about continuing to live in their rented apartment. In desperation, they resorted to such an unthinkable action. "No, this house isn't mine, and Tom thinks it's normal to do housework," I said. But Jen interrupted me, saying, "Lies, all lies. You're just interpreting things to suit yourself." I wanted to say that it was actually her doing that, but I first needed to get the facts straight. "Where did you sell it?" I asked. "Was it to AA Real Estate?" They did an easy online assessment, sent them the necessary documents, and they sold it easily. It's a convenient world, isn't it? It turns out she found an easy evaluation real estate agent online and requested the sale through them. The buyer was looking for a house in that area. "You won't get such a high price for a house this old anywhere else," they said. "They convinced me it was the right time to sell. That's why you should be grateful, selling a 20-year-old house for $300,000. I found a good real estate, didn't I?" she boasted. I looked up the real estate company online and found a website that seemed right. I tried calling them, but there was no answer. When I asked Jane if she had visited the real estate company at this address, she replied, "No, I didn't go there. You don't need to do that nowadays." I told her, "First, go to this address tomorrow. If you don't, I won't discuss this any further," and sent her home reluctantly. She left, and the next day, I received a tearful call from her. It's not there. The real estate company doesn't exist at the address." There was only a dilapidated wooden house, seemingly uninhabited, she confessed. "Why?" she wailed. I was so astonished by her foolishness that I burst into laughter. When she returned, she explained that during my absence, she'd have found the house registration certificate in my name and thought she could sell it. So she contracted the real estate agent who shamelessly assured her, "Even if you're not the owner, It's fine if you have that certificate. Some people pass away after all. Just provide us with the family register and signature certificate. Naively believing them, she sent all the requested documents to the agent. When they found a buyer, they asked for a deposit, half of the commission fee, so she transferred $4,800, half of the $9,600 commission on the $300,000 sale. I called the police to explain the situation. 2 officers came to our house. It turns out this kind of internet fraud, posing as real estate agents, has become common. They offer free valuation, ask for official documents, introduce a supposed buyer, take a fee, and then disappear. It was a devious scheme, recently with many vacant houses and the ability to fake addresses for document delivery. Such frauds have become more common. The fraudsters probably wrote their name on a postbox and received the documents there. Jane was trembling as she answered the police officer's questions. Let me ask you again, the house deed you sent. It belongs to your daughter-in-law, right? The officer asked, tilting his head in confusion. Yes, I did, realizing the gravity of the situation. As the third party got involved, Jane nervously started. I thought that, well, it belonged to my son, but was quickly countered by the officer. Even if it was your son's, isn't it strange trying to sell someone else's house? He said incredulously. Red-faced, she blurted out, no, it's not like that. Emily asked me too. She wanted to get the house appraised to sell it, spouting a nonsensical excuse. The officer turned to me and asked, is that true? To which I simply replied, no, I didn't ask for that. The officer, unsure of whom's testimony to believe, eventually seemed to trust me over my visibly distressed Jane. She says she didn't ask for it. You shouldn't sell things on your own, madame. Normally, this wouldn't even be possible. This is just outrageous, he lectured, and Jane bit her lip, looking down in silence. The officer, now convinced of Jane's rash actions, inquired about the deed registration. You sent a copy, right? When she replied in a faint voice, no, it was the original, the officer was even more astounded. He shrunk further in dismay, looking at me. The officer asked, will you file a theft report? I answered, no, that document is invalid now. Actually, this house has already been sold to someone else. When we saw it, we could do so just with the registration identification information. The law had changed, so the deed registration wasn't needed. Indeed, I had received the deed when I inherited the house from my parents, but it was unnecessary when selling the house, so I kept it as a memento. Jane, unaware of this, thought that deed meant I still owned the house. Normally, real estate agents would request or retrieve a copy of the deed themselves for verification, but fraudsters didn't need such details. After all the embarrassment, she looked at me resentfully and muttered, why didn't you sell the house? It's a curse to sell your parents' home. People in flashy jobs are like this. I met her gaze and said, Tom wanted it. He needed a lump sum. Jane exclaimed, her face turning even bluer with surprise. At that time, Tom wanted to start his dream photography business, but didn't have enough funds. The house was our only significant asset, so we sold it to an acquaintance and rented it back. When I explained everything in one go, Jane's shoulders slumped as she muttered, so Tom's success now is because you sold the house, Emily. Well, I could say that, but I believe that spouses should stick together through thick and thin. We're in this together, I replied. Upon hearing this, Jane suddenly began to cry bitterly. I wanted to work too, she sobbed. My husband can't do anything even now after his retirement. He does nothing. What has my life been for? Her litany of complaints against Tom continued, leaving the police officer struggling to complete the report. Ultimately, the fraud report was filed. But even after 10 years, the culprits have not been caught. It's unlikely that the money will ever be recovered. Following the incident, Steve became vigilant over Jane's actions and took over all financial control, denying her any access to money. Whenever she needed something, she had to request it from him and would be given cash. It's so suffocating, Jane complained to Tom, who reminded her that she brought it upon herself. Now, with no disposable income, she works through senior job listings and currently teaches the elderly how to use smartphones. She's well regarded for her ability to empathize with the struggles of older learners. Steve, perhaps due to his pride, found senior jobs unsuitable and quit soon after starting, providing no income. Nowadays, Jane is busier, often leaving him with household duties as she goes out. Interestingly, he's taken an interest in cooking and is getting quite good at it. The roles in Tom's parents' house have reversed, but both seem to have found new fulfillment. As for me, after my overseas business trip, I successfully climbed the career ladder and now anchor the evening news. Tom's photography studio is thriving, and we've managed to save enough to consider buying back and renovating the family home. We are grateful to our acquaintance for allowing us to keep the house despite the outrageous incident. It worked out well for Tom's parents in the end. Our son is turning 17 and approaching adulthood, so I shared the story with him as a cautionary tale about internet fraud. However, to preserve his grandparents' dignity, I've kept the part about them trying to sell our house a secret.